Before the first coin flip, before the first kickoff, you just gotta check out the Sideline Sizzle with the youngest sports commentator in American radio. Here's Tristan Blackman with the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome to another edition of the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Hope you had a great week, and let's hope for an even better weekend as it's packed full of football. Last weekend, we saw College Football Kickoff, and there were a few surprises we saw in the opening games. We'll talk about that, as well as the NFL, which kicked off this past Thursday and will continue through this week. Lots to talk about in this week's show, so let's kick things off with college football. Let's take a trip around the top 25, which mostly consisted of blowout games, but there were a few nail-biters hidden in the mix as well. To be fair, anyone ranked in the top 25 for the preseason doesn't really count in my eyes, as it's merely a speculative ranking. Speaking of blowout games, though, number 20 ranked Oklahoma, perhaps ranked a little too low in their home opener against Arkansas State. Oklahoma jumped to a lead very quickly, and this game was seemingly over before the conclusion of the first quarter. This was arguably the worst blowout of the weekend, as Oklahoma embarrassed Arkansas State, beating them 73-0. Yikes. Now, I say that Oklahoma game was arguably the worst blowout and not undoubtedly the worst blowout because of this next game. 15-ranked Oregon faced Portland State, a school that frankly I've never even heard of, and I especially was unaware that they had a football team. Anyway, Oregon dominated this game, taking down Portland State with a score of 81-7. I know it wasn't a shutout, but it definitely was a blowout. At least this team could at least score points, unlike Arkansas State could. Number 22 Ole Miss with another blowout game in the opener. Here, they took down Mercer with a score of 73-7. Now, number 25 Iowa, they didn't put up nearly as many points as some of their SEC rivals across the NCAA did, only putting up 24 points against Utah State in their opening game. Transfer quarterback out of Michigan, forgive me if I mispronounce his name, Cade McNamara, looked pretty good in his first game with Iowa, but the offense stalled in the second half. Still a solid win from Iowa here, but definitely need to keep their pace offensively without letting the defense figure them out, so to speak. Number 12 ranked Tennessee had no trouble putting up points against Virginia here, as new starting quarterback Joe Milton took the center stage. A lot of eyes on this Tennessee team too, after they lost such a significant amount of talent offensively, losing Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt, and Darnell Wright, just to name a few. With Hooker finally reaching the NFL draft, Joe Milton in particular had a lot of eyes on him, and he didn't play exceptionally well to start off, but did pull his act together as the game went on. Maybe Virginia just had a rough start to their season, but after a 49-13 win, it looks to me like Tennessee is bound to have another great season. Not sure if they'll end up pulling an upset win over Alabama like they did last year, but they should still perform like a top 25 team is expected to perform at the very least. Now, this was a Thursday night game, but number 14 ranked Utah made a statement against Florida in their opening game. I expect Utah to win this game, especially against Florida, who gets overhyped every single year. I'm just glad that nobody threw them into the top 25 conversation because they don't deserve it whatsoever. Utah, though, they could potentially find themselves creeping into the top 10 if they keep their foot on the gas, and that's coming even after losing some very talented players from last season. Maybe this game wasn't so much Utah playing at an exceptionally high level, but rather Florida playing to an unbelievably low level. No wonder that even with Anthony Richardson, this team found ways to appear completely unprepared for football games. Final score from Utah. Utah wins this one 24-11. On to a game in which a Florida football team didn't look so lost. Number 8 Florida State with a massively impressive outing against number 5 LSU. The first half was a super tight ball game, but the second half was just wow. Florida State, if they keep this going, could end up in the top 4, especially considering the ACC might be wide open with Clemson struggling early. We'll get to that later. Anyway, Florida State picks up a huge win and totally embarrasses a very hyped up LSU team with a score of 45-24. Then, number 19 ranked Wisconsin. They had a very rocky start to this game, allowing Buffalo to drive down the field and score very quickly as they took on Buffalo, of course. They also had some moments on offense where Wisconsin, they struggled. However, they cleaned up their act and pulled it together, winning with a score of 38-17. All in all, it was a good game to start the season, and Wisconsin will have time to improve, of course, as the season goes on. Number 1, Georgia won over T.N. Martin with a score of 48-7. The Bulldogs probably on their way to yet another national championship run at this point. Then, number 4, Alabama, they took down Middle Tennessee 56-7 in that game. A couple of other games here. Number 10, Washington beat Boise State 56-19. Number 16, Kansas State beat Southeast Missouri State with a score of 45-0. Number 7, Penn State took down West Virginia 38-15. And number 23, Texas A&M beat New Mexico 52-10. Now, number 6 USC and number 13 Notre Dame both had a stretch of 2 games during the opening weekend. They did end up winning both games. Notre Dame beat Navy in their initial game 42-3 and then beat Tennessee State 56-3. Meanwhile, USC, they dominated their opponents as well. Heisman winner quarterback Caleb Williams played phenomenal, tossed a total of 9 touchdowns over the course of just these 2 games. He led USC to beat San Jose State in their opener 56-28, then Nevada 66-14. Moving on to number 2, Michigan, who was without head coach Jim Harbaugh after he was suspended for 2 games by the NCAA. They didn't have a lot of trouble taking down East Carolina by a score of 30-3 without Jim Harbaugh. Their Big Ten rival, Ohio State, their performance in the opener was a little underwhelming, especially for their elite receivers. Ohio State, they did win the opening game against Indiana, but only with a score of 23-3. For number 11, Texas, this team went up against Rice, and some were saying after the game that Texas didn't play very well. In my opinion, it's the first game, and based on what I saw from the Texas game, which wasn't very much, they just seemed to be experimenting with different plays and play styles, and that's what you're supposed to do in week 1. And hey, they still won the game with a fairly decent margin in between them and Rice, as they won 37-10. I think this team can and will perform much better than last year. They just need to be consistent. With number 18 ranked Oregon State, how about DJ Uiagalelei? An impressive game from him. I had a lot of bitter feelings about DJ while in Clemson, but the transfer is really starting to come together as a player, and I think he can succeed at Oregon State. This team looked good in the opener, and if they keep this going, they're bound for, at the very least, a 10-win season. Oregon State and DJ Uiagalelei, they take down San Jose State 42-17. Number 24 ranked Tulane put together a solid first outing as they took down South Alabama 37-17. Let's look at some more regionally important games with number 21 North Carolina facing South Carolina. What a game. Both teams looked electric in that first half, but it was North Carolina that could actually keep pace and momentum in that second half. Drake May, very highly touted prospect for the NFL draft in 2024, put together a decent performance. South Carolina played some tenacious football, especially, like I said, in that first half. North Carolina did end up winning this one, though, with a score of 31-17 over the Gamecocks. Looking at my school's team, Coastal Carolina, they opened the season against UCLA, one of the biggest schools Coastal's football team has had to go against in terms of their football program. We had to travel all the way from Conway, South Carolina, over to Los Angeles, where UCLA's campus is located. Honestly, I expected a blowout of sorts, but UCLA lost a good bit of talent, 2 players either graduating or heading to the NFL. Coastal actually managed to hang in there and at one point actually trailed UCLA by just 1 point with a score of 14-13. However, the offense totally stalled in the fourth quarter. The defense let up a lot of big plays, and CCU just couldn't hang in the football game. I think considering the circumstances, it was a solid game. We definitely missed the mark offensively on several occasions, heck, most occasions, but went across the country to face a team much better than us, and we fought to the final whistle. Final score from LA, the Bruins won 27-13. And then this past Monday, we all had to witness whatever abomination the Clemson Tigers decided to leave on the field. Clemson was ranked too high. I'm sorry, but it's true. That was my initial thought heading into the season, and hey, it rang true, because this game was awful. Clemson looked totally lost, unprepared, confused, all of the above. This team looked like anything but competent, being ranked at number 9 and going up against unranked Duke. It's had a lot of people starting to question whether or not this is the end of Clemson football, and to that I say no. Before we jump to such a conclusion, let's hold our horses and see how things go the rest of the season. To be fair though, Clemson's recruiting has taken a major hit. Their coaching staff is far from what it used to be. That's taken a major hit. And Clemson keeps bringing in quarterbacks that do not fit into this offense. Granted, we had Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. But look at the guys before and after them. Kelly Bryant with Clemson, he really wasn't that bad, but didn't end up panning out for him. We had Trevor Lawrence. Then, of course, DJ. He was awful with us. Now Cade Klubnik, who frankly looked absolutely awful throwing the football the other night. All these players, they're not that bad talent-wise. We know they've got talent, and players like these are all guys that looked great coming out of high school. Maybe Clemson needs to look a little bit more internally as to why they don't win football games, particularly on offense. They need to cut down on mistakes, for sure. I'm definitely not going to say that this is the end of Clemson football at all, and there is still time in the season to turn things around. But what I will say is that if Deion Sanders can make it happen with a group of guys that he has to work with, well, you think Dabo Swinney and his 4 to 5-star recruits with multi-million-dollar indoor practice facilities could do the same thing. And now, moving on, don't think that I just forgot about this game. The best game on television all weekend, in my opinion. Yes, speaking of Deion Sanders and Colorado, they faced last year's runner-up and national championship contender, TCU. I watched the entire game, and while I was trying my best to get some assignments and homework done, at one point I just put the work away and I watched the game. It was a very exciting game. Points were scored left and right, especially towards the end. First off, Deion Sanders did these boys right. They actually played a phenomenal game against a very good opponent. His son and quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, played phenomenal himself, shattering Colorado's single-game passing record in his first game. Over 500 yards for Shedeur Sanders in the opener, as well as having 4 different receivers rack up over 100 yards. Then, defensive back and wide receiver Travis Hunter? Yes, Hunter. He had 1, almost 2 interceptions this game, while also hauling in 11 passes for 119 yards. Yes, Travis Hunter is a two-way player and played both wide receiver and cornerback the entire game. Hunter, in total, had 144 snaps in this past weekend's opening game against TCU. He had 80 defensive snaps and 64 offensive snaps. And you know the best part about this entire stat line? In his post-game interview with Fox Sports reporter Jenny Taft, Hunter was asked, "Travis, are you tired?" And he responded with, "Nah, I'm not tired. I'm ready to go back again." Travis Hunter is a superhuman. Playing 144 snaps in a single game is just insane. And of course, to finish things off with the remark, "Nah, I'm not tired. It's just awesome." This team is awesome. There's a lot of talented pieces outside of just Travis and Shedeur, and I really do think after this win that this team can go places, especially with Dylan Edwards, who, if you didn't watch the game, he had a monster performance. And just so all of you know that I'm not hopping on the Deion Sanders bandwagon, I said that this was a huge signing for Colorado when he was first hired. I've already been on the Deion Sanders bandwagon. I'm a believer. Seriously, don't write this team off. They may not be as great as a team like Alabama or Georgia, but Deion went after some dogs. This team has dogs, and these guys, they know they can win, and they did. Colorado, with an amazing performance, shocks the college football world in a way, and they took down number 17 TCU with a score of 45-42, coming just one season after a 1-11 performance on the year. Incredible. Plenty more college football to be played, as there will be games all throughout this weekend. Football is back. Doesn't that feel good to say? Starting this Sunday, there will not be another Sunday until the Super Bowl without some sort of football game going on. And I know a lot of you out there are ready for it. We'll talk about the NFL kickoff, which went down this past Thursday, and then we'll look at what is to come this Sunday. Coming up next, right here on the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm.
We're talking football. You got a problem with that? This is the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome back to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Last segment, we talked about college football in the top 25, which has been shaken up in several ways after LSU, TCU, and Clemson's losses. Clemson dropped from number 9 to number 25, which was very graceful because this team doesn't deserve a slot in the top 25, in my opinion. LSU dropped from 5 to 14, and then TCU, they dropped out of the top 25 entirely from number 17 all the way to being unranked. This moved Duke and Colorado up into the top 25, who were previously unranked. Now we've talked about college football enough for one day, because now it's time to look at the NFL, which kicked off this past Thursday. Kicking things off with, well, the NFL kickoff featuring the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I didn't even watch the first half of this game, but luckily it doesn't matter. The second half of this game told me the entire story. Earlier in the week, it was announced that Travis Kelce wouldn't play in this game, which worried a lot of people around the league, and for good reason. Kelce is the spark plug of this offense. Without him, there is arguably no offense whatsoever. And that was in full effect in this game, as Chiefs receivers dropped countless passes throughout the night. Patrick Mahomes threw beautiful passes, great timing, great pocket awareness, whatever. It's not his fault at all. He does not have talent around him. His offensive line, they took a hit, and the talent there dropped off, as even with Jawan Taylor questionably lined up on the scrimmage line, this offensive line didn't perform well enough at all. The KC receiving corps looked abysmal. I mean, it was scary to watch, and I'm a Broncos fan speaking here. I want to see the Chiefs lose. I just didn't think they'd look so pitiful on offense, and without Eric Bieniemy calling plays offensively, there were some dumb play calls, plain and simple. The Chiefs, on the final drive, went for it on 4th and 25. That was, of course, courtesy of penalties and awful receivers, like I mentioned, but it was an absurd call. They got backed into a corner and couldn't back out of it, and for Detroit, this was a huge game. I'm proud of this Lions team. They played phenomenally. However, if Kelce played in this game, it would have been a Chiefs win. But it wasn't. Lions win 21-20 in Kansas City, and they are definitely winning the NFC North after that game. They look legit. Alright, moving on to what's to come in the NFL this weekend. There are several good games in the works for this opening weekend, and I'll offer some score predictions for each game. Starting off with the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Cleveland to face the Browns. The Bengals opened the season last year with a loss, and it was a bad loss. It had many questioning whether or not Cincinnati was a one-and-done miracle team in the Super Bowl from the previous year. If this were to happen again, I would not be surprised. Joe Burrow missed reps in practice with his injury, and Cleveland could be a great team this season if Deshaun Watson can return to full form with Kevin Stefanski as his coach. Looking closer at Cleveland, I love their defense, especially that pass rush with the newly acquired Zadarius Smith and future Hall of Famer Myles Garrett. The combination of these two alone should be enough to cause Cincinnati some trouble, considering the strength of their offensive line. It isn't all bad for Cincinnati, as they made sure to improve that area of their offense in particular. They brought in Orlando Brown from Kansas City, who is a premier tackle at the position, I'd say. And he's also much more consistent than La'el Collins. The Bengals brought in Collins last offseason and came to regret it after he has fallen victim to a bit of an injury bug and is likely going to be sidelined this season, at least to start he is. Jonah Williams is expected to step up in his place, and if the offensive line can win the trench battle in this game, then the Bengals will probably win this one. Give me Cincinnati here with a score of 24-13 over the Browns. Then the Houston Texans battle the Baltimore Ravens. While I am hopeful for C.J. Stroud's debut game, the Texans aren't winning this one. The Ravens' roster in Week 1 will be, for the most part, fully healthy on multiple areas of the field, the most notable being at quarterback. With Lamar Jackson healthy in this game, you can forget about the Texans making a stand against this team. Rather than watching out for rookie C.J. Stroud, you may want to watch out for rookie receiver Zay Flowers for the Ravens, who could adopt the role of wide receiver 1 with a good performance in this game. Give me the Ravens winning 27-9. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers face the Minnesota Vikings this weekend. Both these teams are on the decline, as the Vikings lost countless assets, both offensively and defensively. They lost Patrick Peterson, Zadarius Smith, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, and many others. Even with those pieces on their roster, this team was overrated. Well, luckily they faced the Buccaneers, who are most certainly in a worse spot than the Vikings. The Bucs do have an elite receiving core for the most part, but don't have a quarterback to deliver the ball to them, nor do they have an offensive line to protect said quarterback. You could make the argument that Baker Mayfield has a chance to play well, but I won't be considering any argument of the sorts because he's looked awful in training camp. Mayfield, at this point in his career, also has a track record of just looking awful in general, especially for someone who was once the number 1 overall selection in the NFL draft. Give me Kirk Cousins and the Vikings here, winning this game 23-16. Alright, now we've got a good game brewing here, as it's the Carolina Panthers facing the Atlanta Falcons. While this isn't necessarily a nationally recognized rivalry, these teams are rivals, believe me. With rookie quarterback Bryce Young for Carolina and sophomore quarterback Desmond Ridder on the Falcons, who has been named the starter heading into the season for the first time in his career, this will be an interesting game. These two teams have brought in new elements to their running game, with Miles Sanders suiting up for Carolina and rookie running back Bijan Robinson for Atlanta. There's a lot of names to look for in this opening game. These two teams have a good bit to prove. I think this game will be a close one, and this may be a hot take, but I have Atlanta winning. Bijan Robinson will be an instant impact kind of player. There isn't really a reality in which a prospect of this caliber ends up on the bench. Even without Robinson, Atlanta has Tyler Algier, who had an impressive 2022 season, and Cordero Patterson, who isn't even listed as a running back or receiver on Atlanta's roster. Instead, they gave him the position of the letter J, which stands for Joker, apparently. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, in this game, I'm not doubting Bryce Young's capabilities or anything. I just doubt that he comes out firing in week 1. Go ahead and prove me wrong, Bryce. I'd love to see him kick off his career with a bang, but give me the Falcons here with a score of 26-23. Then it's the Arizona Cardinals facing the Washington Commanders. Unless you like either of these teams, don't watch this game. The Cardinals are awful, and Washington won't look much better. At least, I don't think they will. Some say that Washington is preparing for a breakout season and that they are the most likely sleeper team to make the playoffs. How about we stay a little more grounded on planet Earth instead of exploring whatever galaxy you are in, if you think that'll happen? Now, I do think Washington wins here. I just don't know how they'll perform following this game. Give me Washington with a score of 26-6 over the Cardinals. Then the Jacksonville Jaguars face the Indianapolis Colts. Well, there's not much of a chance for Indianapolis in this game unless Anthony Richardson can learn how to fly. He might be a dual-threat quarterback with a lot of potential, but he doesn't have a lot of talent around him. Sure, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. You see, I was going to say Jonathan Taylor, but he's been ruled out for this game, and several others early in the stretch of the season. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, they just bring too much firepower to this game and should fare well against the Colts defense that didn't get much better this offseason. I have the Jaguars winning 31-16 against the Indianapolis Colts. Moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, who will take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This game is going to be a good old-fashioned defensive slugfest. I can just see it now. Unless it's not. There are offensive weapons on either team for this game, but the combined defensive strength of both teams is unreal. Plus, it's week 1. You're looking at a predominantly healthy 49ers defense and a predominantly healthy Steelers defense. I mean, this game features arguably the top 2 edge rushers in the league, with TJ Watt and Nick Bosa, who will be playing as he just signed his new $170 million contract. Bosa is making $34 million a season with that contract, so yes, it is the biggest contract given out to an edge rusher in NFL history. Anyway, I think the 49ers win this game, but it will not come easy for them. They're going to need to be prepared and fight for every yard, so I have them winning with a score of 22-18 over the Steelers. Moving to another game here, the Tennessee Titans facing the New Orleans Saints. In my season predictions, I had the Titans finishing the year with an awful record, and I was definitely very hard on this team. I do think that they have the capability to finish with a good record, just nothing over 9 or 10 wins, heck, I'd maybe even say 8 wins. This game against the Saints will be tough for them, and I know they have a stout defense, but so does New Orleans. What New Orleans has that Tennessee doesn't is a competent quarterback right now, which will be the difference in this game. I think with Derek Carr commanding the offense, New Orleans has the clear advantage here. Otherwise, this game might be a tight matchup, who knows? For this game, though, I have the Saints winning with a score of 28-17. Then, moving out of the 1 o'clock games into the games starting about 4:25, we'll start with the Las Vegas Raiders heading to Denver to take on the Broncos. It's a road game for Las Vegas, going against one of the AFC's best defenses, and it will be tough for them. Josh McDaniels is calling plays, Jimmy Garoppolo is throwing the ball, and aside from Max Crosby, the defense for Las Vegas is terrible. It's the truth. The Las Vegas Raiders are a bad team. Now granted, so are my Denver Broncos, but I can just about guarantee we'll win this game. My only question is, how many points can the Broncos score to get it done? For prediction's sake, I'll say 20, but I know it'll probably be around 9 or 12, being realistic here. Broncos win this game 20-13 over the Raiders, but like I said, probably won't score that many points. Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who will be taking on the New England Patriots in a Super Bowl 52 rematch game. And just like Super Bowl 52, I think the Eagles take this game. Sure, the Patriots will put up a good fight. I doubt this game is a blowout. What I will say, though, is that while the Patriots defense will do their best to stop this Eagles offense, the Eagles defense won't have much trouble stuffing New England's offense. With the addition of Ezekiel Elliott, I'm sure the Patriots offense will have improved for the better. Plus, they got rid of Matt Patricia, so the play calling will be better, I can tell you that. But let's be honest here, the Patriots are totally outmatched in this game, and I think week 1, it'll be a loss for them. Give me the Eagles in this game, winning with a score of 28-17. Then it's the Los Angeles Rams facing the Seattle Seahawks, with Cooper Kupp having been ruled out for week 1, which comes as no surprise to me. If you caught my fantasy football tips segment on the show, I spoke on Kupp's uncertain injury status, and a little promo here. If you didn't catch that episode and want to check it out, visit our YouTube at youtube.com/@Sideline Sizzle. Anyway, the Rams without Kupp means virtually no offense, and on defense, their only real piece is Aaron Donald. He's also coming off of an injury suffered last season, so I'm really not sure about this Rams team. Seattle shouldn't have a lot of trouble here in week 1, so I have them winning with a score of 26-9. Here with another West Coast matchup with another Los Angeles team. This should be a pretty good game. These two teams have had some bad injury problems in the past, particularly the Chargers. However, week 1 is usually when the injuries should be down, so these two teams should play well. I think on paper, the Chargers are just better than the Dolphins here, even with an explosive receiving core for Miami, which Los Angeles also seems to have. I would expect this game to be high scoring, and if it comes down to a shootout, this will be a close game. For this game, though, I've got the Chargers winning with a score of 37-33. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, who are going up against the Chicago Bears. There is quite a lot of hype around this Bears team. A lot of people think Justin Fields will make a similar leap to what Jalen Hurts did last year. I'm somewhat doubtful of that in all honesty, but I won't deny that it's possible. In fact, I think week 1, the Bears will beat the Packers, whose offense is a little questionable if I'm being honest. Defensively, this Packers team is quite talented, but again, that offense with Jordan Love I am skeptical about, and I do think that Chicago has a chance to take down Green Bay in week 1. So I have the Bears winning with a score of 18-13. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants, a game that will be featured on Sunday Night Football. Alright, honestly, I think the Cowboys should win this game, I really do. However, the Giants are coming into year 2 of the Brian Daboll era, and honestly, with acquisitions like Darren Waller, I think it could be a close game at the very least. New York's defense is looking good, and I personally think that it only got better this past offseason. On the other hand, though, Dallas also had some solid acquisitions, bringing in Brandon Cooks and Stephon Gilmore. I don't know, part of me wants to underestimate the Dallas Cowboys because it's logical, but I also don't want to overestimate the Giants. For this game, give me New York though. I have them winning with a score of 23-20. And finally, looking at Monday Night Football, it's the Buffalo Bills facing the New York Jets. We know the storyline for this game. It's Aaron Rodgers' opening game with his new team. I think he'll play well. I expect the Jets' offense to play well as their defense. But historically, Buffalo has opened the season firing on all cylinders, so it will be a tight game. When it's all said and done, though, I expect the Jets to win this opening game. I really do. Buffalo is not at full strength defensively, with Von Miller still out, who is such a critical part of their pass rush. Also, they didn't close last season with a very impressive game or anything, so I'm doubtful now whether or not they truly are the best team in their division. With it being a home game for New York as well, I have them winning with a score of 28-26 over the Bills. With that, we have covered every NFL game coming up this Sunday and into Monday night. An exciting weekend of football is upon us, and certainly can't forget about some more exciting games in the college football scene. Anyway, that's all we've got for this week's show. If you enjoyed and want to check out more, visit our website at thesidelinessizzle.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesidelinessizzle. You've been listening to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm, and we'll catch you next week.